way! That's wild. Alright, cool. I appreciate you, man. You are the realest of real. Okay, so we'll go back because I was talking previously about... So we're going to wrap up the final... We're going to wrap up the previous point. We're going to cut that in post, by the way. So the previous point I want to talk about is this. When you're casting, it's very different than analysis. Casting is the art of don't have dead air. Analysis is the art of have so much to talk about that people are entertained and find it interesting. Be entertaining yourself in a very caster-like way. As soon as you're done, boom, on to the next point. You want to stuff that thing. It's like a good manicotti or lasagna. You want to slam as much information in it as possible. So we're going to go on to this next point that I was just speaking my brains and no one could hear me on, so I'll repeat. I've pushed the nascent balance states, remade metas, and pushed analytical development of multiple RTS games. Ones that you have not heard of because they're not StarCraft 2, StarCraft Brood War, Warcraft 3, Company of Heroes, right? Company of Heroes 2, Age of Empires 2, Age of Empires 4, to a lesser extent Zero Space. I've done that for a very long time, right? Let's go over some of the games. So Istrolade is a game that this is a top-down, build-your-own ship, real-time strategy game where you gain resources by taking control of Dominion-like points. The developer of that game, Treeform, I was talking to him all through the Steam Greenlight process. He told me that I was the only person that, when he asked, actually made analytical content. I made a for fun bit of content where I showed how you could beat through the campaign that he had just developed, which he had begged other people to play through, but no one else had made. I had made some for new players guides, like some ships, not competitive stuff, because I wasn't competitive in that game, but I was making content for his game that he was trying to get on Steamlight, and he thanked me specifically for those efforts and mentioned me by name for those efforts. Then we're going to go to another RTS, which is Tooth and Tail. God bless Deadbones because he's no longer with us, but I played with Xinu and Deadbones a lot for Tooth and Tail because in a game that is very simple mechanically, and a lot of people were trying to use the tricks of the leader and tier 3 units to like try and get the best explosions or win the smallest micro battle edge, or you when the burrow timing was so you can transfer around the map. If you've never played the game, you wouldn't know about these things, but it's actually quite a deep game. But the basic thing that you have to know about Tooth and Tail is that this was a game, it was an RTS where you had farms, kind of like AoE 2, AoE 4, except only in an area around a mill, which is basically your town center. And the kicker was that it was procedurally generated. Or if it wasn't, it was made by a variety of maps. And the problem with that, for most people, was very simple, is that those maps, you don't know which one you're on. You don't know what seed you're on. Hell, you might be on a brand new one that's actually never been seen before. Sure, something like it will be similar, but this river wasn't here, and this thing over here didn't actually quite work that way, and then this mill you think is in the corner, it's not actually there anymore. And my style was, I'm not a hands person. I'm not playing on controller, which is one of the big appeals of Tooth and Tail. So I'm going to pick the dumb, safe units that have very low micro potential. I'm going to pick things like fences and turrets, and my game plan was always, we're going to split the map 50-50, but I'm going to take the 5% that you think is part of your 50. So if there's 7 bases, you'll have 3, I'll have 3, and I will always be owning or pushing to own that 4th base, and you will never secure it. And I played a lot with Deadbones and Xinu on that game, and we practiced micro tricks, and we just played for hours and hours and hours and hours, and I was in Discord calls all the time with players talking about this approach, because in a game where it seemed very like reflexive, kind of speedy, like APM taxi on your controller, I know that sounds crazy to people who are from mouse and keyboard, but it was the case. I had this idea of, oh, here's how you can play that's a little bit different. Here's the one that's actually I started doing like a lot for is Guardians of Atlas. I already talked about the fact that I was 5th out of 52 people. You need to know something about Guardians of Atlas, which is that there were 4 colors, white, red, blue, green, and you just need to know that in the top 12 or maybe even the top 16, every single team that got below, got to a certain cut of the tournament and passed was almost the exact same 3 heroes, and their setup was green, blue, red. Usually red is Big's AoE spellcasters, blue for invincible tanky frontline, and green because there was a hero that was basically worth the whole faction on by himself. So I got myself, Xinu, who is Heroes of the Storm player, you may have heard of him. He kind of got the gold mine and then the shaft, as it were, as a result of some things that happened over at another company that you will know well of if you've played StarCraft 2. Just think about it. Think about it. And so our team didn't do that. You know why? Because in the weeks before the tournament, in the months during the beta, I started and I sucked, and hands-wise I wasn't very good. So I found strategies, and I ranked all of the heroes, and I figured out what the map objectives were, and I figured out how much you could take on a certain area pushing forward, and what's the synergies that other people aren't looking for. Now, the way MMR was calculated, because this was a 3v3 game, was that you just took all of the MMR of each of the individual players, and you added them together, and then that was their total MMR, and then they seeded the teams like that. So, right, if it was like crayon, pencil, and broken fingernail, and then it was like hope diamond, the royal crown, and then the pyramids of Giza, right? Like, this is a big level of MMR. This is a tiny level of MMR. If you haven't been part of tournaments, you won't know this, but it is very rare that what happened did happen. So my team came in and we didn't play blue at all. Blue was considered a mandatory color by the rest of the player bases, and you were instantly throwing. You actually didn't want to compete if you were not playing blue. Like, you were just dog shit. You were making a horrible mistake. And our team was white, red, and green, and our plan was, instead of big AoE spellcasters for red, attack the people from the back. Instead of having an invincible front line with blue, use a supportive spellcaster of white that has the ability to gust away units and push them off of a big central area. And then my area, not to have the big tanky dog, like, strong, brawling green that everyone else did with their other faction. Oh no, I used the considerably weaker faction of green, who has a global ultimate that's an AoE stun, and who was very good at getting up to a certain unit, who looked like it was a big tank, but whose real thing was that it could just plant its hands in the ground and absorb damage over time. So our team, despite not having the mandatory color and using an off-meta strategy, we were supposed to be 5th or 6th, and we finished 5th. I cannot tell you how rare that is. And after that, had a bunch of people, Milia, Tedster, like that, all through, Double Dedros, a bunch of people throughout that. Even though I was not ever the hands player, they never respected me for my ability to like hands and do things like that. They thought that I was actually a person worth talking to about the game, right? Maybe not to be on their team if they had tournament winning aspirations, because we didn't know in the final days of Goa that Guardians of Atlas, that Artillery Games, the parent company, was going to shut down. And these people were talking to me all the time, and I got a lot of traction about all of the builds that I, like the builds that I had thought of, and the creep paths that I had made, and the fact that I was a nerd about the game. I played, but I was a nerd about the game. And that's another RTS. Now, I don't blame you for not knowing about that, because it never got off of the technical pre-alpha tournament, really. It got to alpha, and then it just kind of sputtered, and no one ever heard anything about it again. Its assets were sold somewhere else. So I don't blame you for not knowing about that from 7.5 years ago. But this isn't my first time at the rodeo. Speaking of not my first time at the rodeo for analysis, just LittleWarGame. Just that game that's in my Twitch bio that I think I still have links on. You know the LittleWarGame RTS channel? I made that channel. It's got like 161 videos on it, on and off of analysis and games played over the last 10 years. If you've been a long time follower of this channel, you know there was a period where I just decided for a month to grind LittleWarGame and improve my metagame understanding and actually put in the mechanics and the hands practice of it. Just a couple of things I've done. Made 3 or 4 runs of the tutorials, made the campaign, discovered multiple new editor techniques. People complain about how modern RTSs don't have editors. I was not only finding those techniques, I was making tutorials for them. I was doing analysis of the games. One of the best players of that game, maybe even the best player of that game, is square root of -1. And he said that actually he didn't think that I could keep up with him on a hands level, but he always loved hearing what I had to say, and he thought my analysis was bang on point for people that were above my level and below his level. Unless you think, oh, that LittleWarGame is just that like tiny little game that I think, I didn't Hearthstone play it one time. No one cares about that. It's a free RTS. I promise you we have had multiple GMs whose names that you've probably not heard of, but you're starting to get to the point where you should have heard of, right? That have been in LittleWarGame. We have had people who, if I gave you the names, right, that's their story to tell. But if I gave you the names, you would know the names of the people who are playing. In fact, if you're watching Stormgate, there are people that have done well in Stormgate events that are in the LittleWarGame community, right? And there are people who are in the LittleWarGame community who are well above in clearing the GM level multiple times over. So there are some very strong people inside of that game. And guess what? The same thing happens there. There are people who are the best at that game, and really care about what I have to say and think my analysis is great and they love what I have to say about the game. There are people who think my analysis is good and they don't like my theory crafting. There are people who love my theory crafting and they're not really sure that my hands can keep up with what I'm saying, or it's not realistic to expect people to do that. And there are people with whom we just have disagreements, but guess what? I get to have those disagreements with people because I'm not a nobody who hadn't done any analysis or any gameplay or any thoughts on that for 10 years. And just because you haven't heard about it, listen, I'm not saying it's the biggest game in the world, but we have Google Analytics. There was a period for about 8 years where there were 13,000 monthly plays of LittleWarGame. Now, you might not say that all of those are the same. You might say that there's a lot of repeat of those people, or that there were a lot of guests who were here today, gone tomorrow, and don't know what they're doing. But if I tell you I've made tutorials and campaigns and editor tricks and guides, and I have been in some of those tournaments, and my team won the first Pro League that we had, even though there are super grandmasters from StarCraft 2 and other games in there, then put a little bit of respect on my ability to analyze the game. I'm telling you right now, I'm hard capped with old man hands currently, right, in my current mentality, my current dexterity, at about 225 APM. It's not even the real effective 225 APM, right? It's probably realistically like 150 if we're looking at like EAPM, and probably even below that, right? But there's got to be something that's allowing me to keep up and have the respect of those people who are much better than me, who then incorporate what I put into the analysis of LittleWarGame. And if those people are coming from other games and they're not the best at LittleWarGame, or they're the best at LittleWarGame and they think that I have something to say, then maybe speculate that I could know a little bit about what's going on with RTS. Again, I don't entirely blame you, because I'm not from StarCraft 2, I'm not from Warcraft 3, I'm not from Company of Heroes or Age of Empires 2 or 3 or 4. You haven't heard me from other genres. I get it, okay? I do. I really do. But I've got the same thing going on the sub-theme of real-time strategy games for analysis and thinking about them that I do for about Dance Dance Revolution. You'll never see my name in any DDR competition, and yet I would be a practice partner with and deliberately play ridiculous sets of games with people that you would know, some of which you maybe wish you didn't know, but hey, no community is flawless, right? Fourth point, fourth thing I want to say, and it's in the Reddit thread, is that all of the information that I'm analyzing comes from public games, comes from public sources. Now, if I wanted to get a bunch of points on Reddit, if I wanted a bunch of karma so I can just bite down into that sweet, worthless penny stock Reddit karma, right, I would just say like, okay, let me make the most subhuman face I can. Graphics bad. Nerf Infernals.
Especially since instead of the expected threats, it contained an invitation to dinner. What a weird perception.
Campaign expensive. Like that's what I would do. And it's not that those points are completely ridiculous, right? But I have my own nuance. I have my own perspective on those thoughts. And I would rather actually make content that expounds upon that and gives you something to think about afterwards. And guess what? Whether you love it or you hate it, those are my thoughts. So some other reasons that weren't in the Reddit thread as to why I actually did this and why do I do the analysis. It's fun! It's fun. We don't have to do everything in this world because we're just like bound up in a financial institution and just wrap our worth around our net worth, okay? Right? It's not our net worth or our network that matters. It's just what we think is enjoyable and like lives life for us and gives us a sense of purpose and meaning and clarity and enjoyment. And I enjoy Stormgate. I enjoy trying to figure it out. Like, I really do enjoy the process of looking at something where I have incomplete information and trying to solve it, because guess what? If you play real-time strategy games, that's all you do every single game. That is all you do every single game. You have a metagame, and you have builds, and you have some knowledge, and you have some predilections, and some observations of your opponent that you become better and better at parsing, and your opponent becomes better at hiding as they get higher level. But that whole puzzle dynamic is exactly why we play. Like, the same kind of person who loves playing RTS games for the puzzle is the same kind of person who loves playing tower defense games, who loves playing difficulty challenges, who loves any number of other things that are mechanically difficult or mentally taxing, right? And yes, that means there will be egg on my face when I guess something and it's wrong, and people in the beta could completely wreck me about it. But here's the thing. right? This is the game that everybody plays. The people in the beta who are under the NDA, they might know information that I don't know. That means I'm wrong. But there might be a balance change by the time we see it publicly again. That means that I'm right. And then we could go vice versa. They might actually think that something that I say is right, and then we get to a new balance change or a new meta shift or a new unit or a new faction. It turns out I'm completely out on my ass, and I looked the fool. But I was still confident when I said at the time that I said it, because I'm trying to figure it out. This is all the information that we have publicly, and I've gone as far and as hard as I can finding out that information. Here's another reason why you do that. Let's just think about this for a second. If you're not in the beta, I want you to give this a real thought. Like, I'm not going to tell you it's like some guru magic life-changing shit, but just think about this for a second. There is a $10,000 tournament that is going to be coming up for Stormgate on the Steam Next Fest. There's only going to be one Steam Next Fest. Posit this for me, right? Extend your brain. If you're not in the beta and you want to do anything at that tournament, maybe you want to perform well, maybe you want to write articles about it, maybe you want to stream a lot of it yourself, right? Maybe you want to have hopes of winning, you want to try and overcome this, you want to put up articles for some team site like Stormgate Central, right? If you have any of those aspirations and you're not in the beta, how do you make progress? Well, you probably go obsessively over all of the information that we currently have and try to figure it out as much as possible so that when you see it, I saw this in Reddit earlier actually, it was the most like loserific mentality I think I've ever seen. And the mentality was, well, if I'm not in the beta, it's not really fair to only give me a week while other people have 6 months. First off, they're not playing the same game for 6 months. It's on patch updates. Secondly, if you're the kind of person who says, well, they have an advantage, so I just guess I quit. It's not going to happen for me. Then you're probably not the kind of person who is ever going to make it. You kind of have to embrace the suck. You kind of have to know that you're going in down and out, right? You got dealt a bad hand. You're not in the beta and you wanted to be, or you wanted to make content and you're not in the beta, or you wanted to do analysis and you're not in the beta, or you want to be part of that tournament and you want to be competent and show your RTS chops, or you think that you've learned enough like skill from other games that now this is a chance you could actually try and make something happen with Stormgate. You really like want to grind this game hard. You've set everything else up in your life so that you can do that. And if you have the mentality, oh well, I'm just not going to make it because other people had it first, well then why are you trying? There was always somebody first. I mean, by that logic, as soon as the first playable demo came out to the Stormgate team for Frost Giant Studios, you should have just stopped trying to be good at whatever you were doing relative to Stormgate then. Because, I mean, they're the developers. They saw it first. How could you ever catch up to them? Now, you think that's ridiculous and a fallacy, but you've set yourself up for that. If you want to do well at this tournament or in this community, or if you want to have any aspirations that pertain to Stormgate, whether that's in content or analysis or performance, you kind of have to take all the information you can and subsume it into yourself and then find a way to like put it together so that it has some like synthesis with your understanding of the RTS games, so with your understanding of what your skill level is, so you can go forward and make stuff. So yeah, the question was, you don't have beta access, so why should I listen to you talk about balance? Well, again, those are the reasons. I've been around for a while. I've seen this stuff with other RTSs. I've seen other RTSs actually develop new units and new factions entirely live, both in an indie sense and in actually a larger company sense. Map analysis doesn't care about whether or not something is overpowered or underpowered. I've done this multiple times. This information can actually be gathered. And guess what? The people you would love to have do this are, with extremely few exceptions, under a hard bar that prevents them from actually providing the information you want.